Today's video is going to be a bit different. I want to sit back and analyze the sentence structure of J.R.R. Tolkien and show how he is not just a good writer in how he writes a story, but in the actual words on the page. Like, no one really needs this video, but I just want to sit back and kind of syntactically analyze the genius of J.R.R. Tolkien. And so I have three sentences that I want to analyze and talk about today in the Houses of Healing. And let's just jump right in. The first sentence that I want to analyze is my second favorite sentence of this chapter, and it deals with the shock that Merry experiences when he's walking back into the city. I'll read you a bit of the context of the sentence, and the last sentence in this paragraph is the one that I want to analyze. So Théoden and Éowyn came to the city of Gondor, and all who saw them bared their heads and bowed. And they passed through the ash and fume of the burned circle, and went on and up along the streets of stone. To Merry the ascent seemed age-long, a meaningless journey in a hateful dream, going on and on to some dim ending that memory cannot seize. Now, let's talk about the structure of this sentence. There's a few structural choices that J.R.R. Tolkien made with this sentence that makes it just even better than just what the words on the page are actually saying. So Tolkien is for sure the kind of writer that you can tell he edits his own work. He writes a draft, and then he kind of writes a second draft, and probably a third, then maybe a 50th or a 100th. His sentences are just perfect. So you can tell that he spent time on them. And in this specific sentence, it's a really long and multi-layered sentence, which kind of gives you the feeling of this age-long feeling that Merry is also experiencing. And so I'm going to say this over and over, but it puts you in the shoes of Merry to some extent. It also feels a bit abstract, again, to some extent. So it's one of those sentences you just have to reread a few times to be able to process. At least I do. I'm not the biggest abstract thinker. And so it starts with this simple subject-verb construction, which is Merry, or to Merry the ascent seemed age-long, but then expands through something called an appositive phrase, which is a noun phrase that adds an extra meaning onto the original noun. So a meaningless journey in a hateful dream. This kind of brings you into the spiritual realm, though. It feels abstract because the journey, while he is taking, it is physical. It's not really described primarily as being a physical journey. It's one that kind of seemed to Merry to be age-long, like a hateful dream. And then Tolkien adds this participial phrase, going on, and for a good writer, that just gives the feeling of this dragging quality to the age-long feeling. And this is a really long, complex sentence too, so it just drags. And you as the reader feel the drag that Tolkien is describing here. There is a lot of repetition, and there's a lot of cadence in this phrase too, which brings up this idea, this going on is really just a crucial phrase. It's just a little repetition that grammatically slows the pace of the sentence. And this makes, in part, you feel fatigued by this sentence, which mirrors Merry's physical and mental fatigue. I think it creates also this sense of monotony and helplessness, and also hopelessness. And one of the brilliant parts of the sentence, as well as something that I mentioned in other videos, is that Tolkien is talking about a meaningless journey here. And for Tolkien, everything is about meaningful journeys. For a character to have a meaningless journey seems like the height of all evil for him. Imagine, for J.R.R. Tolkien, a character going on a journey that made no difference. It's preposterous to think that. And finally, this last little phrase, to some dim ending that memory cannot seize, adds this really terrifying layer to this sentence, or to this entire story. Memory cannot seize suggests this loss of consciousness and control, and this kind of slide to oblivion. And it's a weird use of the time in this sentence too. If you think about it, it doesn't necessarily make that much sense because you're going on a journey, but your memory cannot seize the journey. Memory is something in the past that you reflect on, and a journey is something in the present or in the future. So the sentence gives you this unsettling feeling about time, where time just seems to kind of cave in on itself and cave in on you, just like it's doing for Merry at this moment. And come back later for an essay about the importance of Merry's memory and where your memory really is stored and where it comes from, because I want to write about that with how Merry's actually brought back from this despair and depression. It's a really brilliant idea. But this sentence has this cumulative effect by just kind of building these really boring descriptive phrases upon other boring descriptive phrases, or maybe more like abstract phrases rather than boring. And so they're hard for people to grasp. And as a reader, I'm forced to just sit and absorb multiple layers of this sensory almost deprivation and this emotional input all at once. And my little brain just cannot handle that sometimes. So Tolkien, through his sentence structure, just makes the reader feel Merry's mood of exhaustion and being alone. It is a really great sentence. But next up is my third favorite sentence of this chapter, and it follows literally the next paragraph of this paragraph that we just talked about. The story then continues, and this is what the story says. Slowly the lights of the torches in front of him flickered and went out. And he was walking in a darkness, and he thought, this is a tunnel leading to a tomb. There we shall stay forever. And this is the good sentence. But suddenly into his dream there fell a living voice. Now that's a really simple sentence, and this last sentence is really the one I want to focus on. And other than the fact that Tolkien is really painting a really dreamlike sequence here, and he gives you the feeling that Merry is kind of in another realm, the sentence, but suddenly into his dream there fell a living voice, is quietly one of his most brilliant, because it's so concrete and it's so elegant at the same time. Now, the first thing that's really interesting about the sentence is this is actually an inversion of the syntax here. So normally a sentence has a subject, then a verb. It's English. And it's reversed in this sentence. A standard order for saying this sentence, like how I would probably write this sentence, is a living voice suddenly fell into his dream. The Tolkien structure is, but suddenly into his dream there fell a living voice. So he places this adverbial phrase into his dream, and then the intensifier suddenly at the start, followed by this verb, fell, and then finally the subject, a living voice. By doing this, he creates this real weird grammatical structure that kind of mimics the emotional experience that Merry is experiencing. Again, when writers do this, it is expert level of writing. It is hard to do this through writing. And when Tolkien does this, I'm held in this brief, like abstract space of this dream tunnel, and then the word fell literally just falls on her lap, and it's given prominence and emphasis in this structure. It almost brings like a sense of intrusion. And the subject, a living voice, is the last part that's revealed too. And basic English and writing classes teach you this, that the emphasis of your sentence should always be the last thing in the sentence, so you kind of hold the reader in the suspended state. And this part gives us the greatest weight to the moment of rescue and who the person is that is the rescuer. But this sentence uses really simple words to show contrast. The idea that his dream, which was described as hateful and like a tunnel leading to a tomb just moments before, feels like it's talking about Merry's dark, exhausted mental state that he's in. The word living immediately contrasts with that. And the deadly cold also. And it talks about the idea of burial in tombs. And it's just such a good contrast here. And then you have the contrast between this dark interior of this dream and the living voice outside, which feels like a huge relief. So it's like as the reader, we're waking up from a bad dream to the simplicity of there fell a living voice, which makes the moment feel like it's providence. So Tolkien understood one of my favorite elements of writing, that when you want something to sound grand and dramatic, write a short, quick sentence. Cut away everything else. Like the sentence, there fell a living voice. He doesn't decorate on it. It just kind of stands on its own. And it provides all the drama and relief that we wanted as a reader. It's another brilliant sentence. But probably my favorite sentence of this entire section is a sentence where Aragorn heals Éowyn. This is the entire sentence. Then, whether Aragorn had indeed some forgotten power of westernness, or whether it was but his words of the Lady Éowyn that wrought on them, as the sweet influence of the herb stole about the chamber, it seemed to those who stood by that a keen wind blew through the window, and it bore no scent, but was an air wholly fresh and clean, and young, as if it had not before been breathed by any living thing, and came new made from snowy mountains high beneath a dome of stars, or from shores of silver far away, washed by seas of foam. Now, this sentence is brilliant. It's just a long run-on sentence, and it is a dang good long run-on sentence. So the sentence starts with the subordinate clause. Again, maybe boring stuff to you, but it just repeats the phrase of the idea of whether this or whether that. Now, this is done for the reader to give you kind of this sense of ambiguity and suspense. You are just kind of waiting for the conclusion on this, whether, and it's weird too, because you can't really keep your eyes on this section. You're just moving fastly to try to figure out what the conclusion is. And it's almost like these two grand ideas, like this mythic way, like it has to be some ancient power, like power and Westernness. Or perhaps it's a simpler idea, like his words to her. So the contrast is huge. And it makes this more than a physical healing. It makes this like a spiritual journey that he's going on, and that she's going on. And it also makes this sentence feel like a resurrection too. Because everything in the beginning is rigid and everything that comes later flows. It's a single long sentence that seems to rise as if the room is being filled with new life. The grammar of the sentence kind of gives you this feeling of inhalation after suffocation. And structurally, the sentence breathes. I would actually kind of recommend that you read the sentence out loud for the sheer breathability of it. And it's just such a great sentence too, because Tolkien is such a songwriter and a poet. What is the analytical approach to the first two clauses quickly becomes lyrics of the way that the wind feels, which maybe is another way that Tolkien is commending how much music and actual poetry matter in the healing process. But again, I just love the length of this sentence. Whereas Merry was jolted out of his dream by a state, like by just this voice, Éowyn, who is no man who also needs no man, is almost wooed out of her state by this idea of freedom. And that freedom slowly washes over her in the form of a really long run-on sentence that might be one of the best run-on sentences that I've ever read before. I've said it before and I will say it again. This Tolkien guy really knows how to write. And that's all I got for you today. Just some boring syntactical analysis of some words of J.R.R. Tolkien. I think he is just a premier, unbelievable writer. So make sure you subscribe if you like this. I'll probably do more of these every once in a while, but not that often. But subscribe if you made it this far. You can also like the video. You can also become a member or donate to the specific video if you want. And as always, remember to look toward Numenor that was, and beyond to Elvenhome that is, and to that which is beyond Elvenhome and will ever be. I'll see you in the next one.